This is my Hannah Montana lip gloss. And I don't care what anyone says about this girl, that is amazing.
Hey gals and girls, my name is Joseph. Today I want to talk a little bit about how I've been learning Japanese over the past 2 months. But first of all, I would like to apologise for there being no video last week. It was my dissertation deadline and a bitch was busy, so... Also, how cute does this setup look with the blue lights? It's my boyfriend's idea. He did it first, I'm just a sheep. If you're interested in learning Japanese, check out his channel. He makes videos about Japanese language, culture, handwriting, etc. It'll be linked in the description box. Anyway, let's just start. 今日の動画では2ヶ月で簡単に日本語を習った方法について話します。まずは初めの頃、教科書を使って文法とか漢字の書き方とかに専念したけども、今考えるとその方法はあまり効果がなかったと思います。それよりもっとリスニングの練習をするべきだったかなと思っています。
Well, she tried. At least, you know, she...
I am incredibly sorry. You have indeed been duped. My real Japanese speaking ability is nowhere near the level of what I just said, and what I said wasn't perfect anyway. My actual Japanese level is more like this. Wow.
What?
Yes.
What?
その方法はあまりWhat's this? 効果がなかったと思います。それより出ます。
Okay.
I spent some time writing that passage and my boyfriend helped me, and like he's a Japanese native. I read it over and over again and I tried to practice. Initially I was going to try and perform the passage as if I was fluent, and it was just too difficult. I can't do it. I think videos like these are really like fucking rampant on YouTube, and I think a lot of them do a great disservice to the language learning community. They make people feel like their progress is inadequate, or that their progress isn't as good as someone else's, or that they're stupid or don't have like the gift for acquiring languages. Not to name names, however, I think there are a particular group of language learning channels on YouTube who pretend to be much more fluent than they are. They do a similar thing where they learn like 5 or 6 basic sentences in another language, or they learn how to introduce themselves in a different language and then perform that in a video. And because of the fluency illusion,
What is that?
when the viewers watch that, if the viewer doesn't speak fluent Japanese, they don't know all of the mistakes that that person is making, and to them they seem fluent. Fluency is a very grey word anyway. I think fluency to me would just be whenever I'm able to understand other people talking about the kinds of ideas that I would try and talk about in English and make myself understood. You know, I'm not gonna like beat myself up because I can't read a perfect translation of Sean Carroll's 2004 Space-Time and Geometry, an Introduction to General Relativity, you know?
No.
So I've actually been studying Japanese on and off for about 2 years, mostly through self-study. You know, a classic tale. I watched Black Butler, fell in love.
I levitated.
The addiction is much more under control now, thank God. I also dabbled in Japanese a little bit when I was a little bit younger, using like random apps and stuff to learn like hiragana and katakana, but I never really stuck with it, or I took it very seriously. But I guess everything changed.
The Fire Nation attacked.
Just after I met my boyfriend like 2 years ago. He had recently moved to London when we met, and his English was a little patchy, but still better than my Japanese. And after things became a little bit more serious, I realized that in order to fully understand the like culture and world and friends and family and everything that he comes from, I should make more of a concerted effort to understand his language. Plus, I still really like anime, and I would really like to watch it without subtitles. Obviously there are other reasons for learning a language, but those are like the main 2 for me. So, how have I studied Japanese? So in the first year, I started with Genki 1. Literally everyone and their mother knows Genki 1. This isn't even my copy. This is my friend's copy that he loaned to me, and I just like kept it, you know, like, thanks babe, let me know if you ever need it back. The book is structured pretty basically. There's a scenario, some new vocabulary, grammar lessons, and then some practice questions to go through. The book is fine. It should take you most of the way to JLPT N5. The JLPT is the Japanese language proficiency test, and it's just like a standard measurement of your general Japanese ability, N5 being the lowest level and N1 being the highest. In that first year as well, I took an 8-week beginner Japanese course at my university, which was kind of trash. I went for the lowest level beginner class because I was worried that through self-study I'd missed a bunch of stuff. But then when I got to the class, it was like too slow and too simple, I think, which is my fault. I should have like chosen a more appropriate class. But that was a glorious waste of money. And then I had maybe like 10 private lessons over italki, which is a wonderful app where there are like community teachers or like highly qualified, very experienced teachers with very different prices who will offer to have lessons of different tiers, I guess. Like you can have one where it's designed for beginners or like lower intermediate, where they'll use the Genki books and they'll like go through them with you and help teach you, and it'll be over Skype. Or if you're a little bit more advanced, they can have like JLPT prep lessons or just conversation lessons. You know, it's really hard for most people to find native Japanese people to like practice conversation with, so it can be really good for that. It's really easy as well for like scheduling. When you're searching for a teacher, you can say what times on what days you're free, and it will only match you with teachers who have said that they are able to teach at those times. Very useful. But beyond those classes, all of my first year was just self-study with textbooks, really. After I finished Genki 1 very slowly, it took me like a year, I ended up stumbling across a method of studying Japanese in my second year, the start of my second year, that at the time was called MIA, which stood for the Mass Immersion Approach, but it's recently rebranded to the Refold method. I literally don't have time to talk about everything that is in this method. It's so in-depth, but in a nutshell, it's a method of simulating like complete immersion, so you can immerse in Japanese anywhere in the world. This creates like a constant feedback loop, and you learn Japanese through huge amounts of comprehensible input. I would highly recommend checking out the Matt vs Japan YouTube channel. I will link it in the description up here and somewhere else. Not here, this side. He has loads of videos on his channel that really clearly explain all of the theory behind the method. I mean, this method isn't just like the ramblings of some white guy. It's backed up by a lot of theory and a lot of studies and a lot of data. Honestly, the method is really impressive, and it's by far, I think, the best method that I've come across in terms of how quickly you will learn and you will be able to understand native Japanese. I think there's quite a big difference between like native Japanese and the Japanese that textbooks teach you, but the method is not without some drawback. So I started using this method around April of 2020 when the UK went into their first lockdown. I had a lot of free time. And I just followed the steps. So I used Anki, a spaced repetition program, which is like a digital flashcard system that optimizes the amount of time between learning some new information and reviewing the information. So it's better for long-term learning rather than just short-term memorization for a test. Very effective. I use this software to learn 1,000 kanji characters that were each assigned an English root meaning. And this acted as a precursor to then studying Japanese further. I then used a sentence card deck from the JLPT Tango N5 book. And after that, I started with the N4 book, but I gave up like halfway through and started just sentence mining instead. I've since kind of stopped with this method, and I've taken a bit of a break from learning in general, as I found that motivation and commitment are really difficult to keep up with at the moment. I actually felt kind of burnt out, and instead I've kind of just moved on to a more casual way of studying, keeping a journal in Japanese, and then every few days my boyfriend will like read it and check it, and we can go through some of the grammar that I get wrong, learn new vocabulary. I find that this works really well because it's more organic, and I get to like practice and learn the vocabulary and grammar structures that I want to use and that I would use if I was using the Japanese. So for example, you can learn vocabulary in the order of its relevance to you in your life. So instead of learning like hotsuji ko before learning donbun, that's like a word that I would use a lot less often in my daily life. Keeping a journal in Japanese as well, I think, is a really good method of maintaining your level instead of just like stopping and then like forgetting everything. So it's really great to kind of fill in those gaps between like intense study and like burnt out, depressive lol. Recently though, I signed up for an intensive Japanese class at International House London, and I think one of the biggest things that didn't really work for me when I was doing the refold or MIA method was that they really strongly discourage speaking until you're at like stage 3 of the method, which is like when you have a really solid understanding of Japanese. They think that you should understand Japanese before you speak it. One of the main reasons they give is that if you speak Japanese before you understand it, you'll make a lot of mistakes and they'll become like ingrained habits, and they're really hard to then change. Sure, I'm really sure that's true, but one of the biggest reasons I'm learning Japanese is to communicate with people, and I feel like so much time and energy and effort has to go into getting to a point where you understand Japanese, and not being able to use it and communicate with anyone with it in that time is really demotivating. And keeping motivated and like keeping the schedule of doing the refold method is just too inconsistent for me. I'm not able to do that. I have a weak mind.
You are absolutely right.
Obviously, learning Japanese is not the only thing that I do with my time. I have a job, I'm a student, I'm a rising YouTube star.
You believe that, Joseph?
I'm just busy. So my hopes for these lessons is that they will help to hold me accountable for the studying and learning. They give me a time and a place twice a week for like 2.5 hours each time to designate to learning Japanese. And on the days in between lessons, I'm still being held accountable. I know that I have homework to hand in and I need to like keep up the pace with everyone else. If I don't study, I'm going to get poor test scores, and if I don't practice, I'm not going to be able to keep up with conversation and keep up with the lesson, like in the lesson. So having spent the money on the lesson, there's like much more of a commitment being made, and I feel like I'm more motivated to study. I imagine moving forward, I'd like to find a blend of the refold method and taking classes. For me, I think having a time and place that will hold me accountable and will like keep me on track, like learning new things twice a week, and then supplementing that learning with my own like immersion during the days in between is probably perfect. And that's kind of the point of this video, that obviously everybody isn't going to learn the same way, and what's really effective for one person isn't necessarily the most effective thing for everyone. I think the best thing you can do as a language learner is experiment with a bunch of different methods and really pay attention to what works and what doesn't work for you. There seems to be so much competition in the language learning community.
No, it's true. No, it's true.
You shouldn't compare your progress to someone else's. Their situation and your situation are going to be completely different, and your goals for learning the language are also going to be different. I think if language learning stops being fun, then you're doing something wrong. It shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't feel like this horrible, arduous task. It should be enjoyable and should grant you access to a new culture, a new world, and millions of more people to communicate with and media to find and discover. So if you have any questions about how I've been learning Japanese, or if you have any specific videos that you want me to make, just let me know in the comments. Just want to say thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.